Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, back here, the Prime Minister has been forced to defend himself again over allegations about his conduct towards women. Boris Johnson tried to put the focus back on policy as the Conservative Party conference got into full swing. But he faced further uncomfortable questions about claims that he groped a female journalist. From Manchester, here's our political correspondent, Daniel Hewitt.
Is your past catching up with you, Prime Minister? Getting Brexit done is the theme of this conference, but getting through each day is the challenge right now for Boris Johnson. On a visit to a local cash and carry in Manchester this morning,
unexpected scan data.
The Prime Minister was forced again to deny his own baggage, flatly refuting the claim by journalist Charlotte Edwards that he'd squeezed her thigh under the table at a private lunch 2 decades ago.
No, and I think what the public want to hear is about what we're doing to level up and unite the country, and the announcements we're making today, the announcements that Sajid Javid, the Chancellor, is going to be making are all about infrastructure.
You're saying it didn't happen, that she made it up?
I'm just saying what I've said.
And if he said he didn't do it, that's enough for the Chancellor.
Do you not feel uncomfortable with that allegation? Do you believe Charlotte Edwards when she says that?
The Prime Minister has said that it is completely untrue, and of course I absolutely trust the Prime Minister, but I'm not going to draw on the nature of the allegation, and all of that, because it's not something that I should really be sort of talking about. It would be inappropriate. These are personal allegations, and sadly these kinds of allegations they do happen.
And while his other ministers remained on message today,
Do you trust the Prime Minister?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely I do.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
among Tory delegates, it wasn't so clear.
Regardless of being Prime Minister or not, if this was just an average person on the street and it was reported to their work, it would be looked into. So I think we need to ensure that just because someone is in a position of power or politics, they don't get special privilege because of that.
Does it concern you as members?
Of course, yeah.
There's always a risk, and we need to ensure that there's a fair trial to ensure that if it did happen, then whatever the repercussions are seen.
I don't think there's been any other Prime Minister where they've dug as much dirt or tried to go underneath.
Do you think it makes it more difficult to sell Boris Johnson on the doorstep when these stories are coming out?
Not finding that at all.
Really?
No, people want him.
The majority of members here certainly do. They put him in power knowing he's a politician for whom the limelight, for better or for worse, has never been far away. Daniel Hewitt, ITV News, Manchester.
Well, much of the conversation here in the cafes and bars has been about the claim by a female journalist, Charlotte Edwards, that Boris Johnson groped her thigh 20 years ago at a lunch, a claim denied by Boris Johnson. This followed a separate investigation into allegations that Mr Johnson didn't declare his friendship with businesswoman Jennifer Arcuri, who was given public grants and access to trade missions while he was London mayor. Cabinet members were today defending him, but how might these issues play with voters? Our political correspondent Liz Bates has been asking people here what they think.
An uncomfortable-looking Boris Johnson, following days of uncomfortable questions. While his party would prefer to talk about policy here in Manchester, it's his character that is dominating this Conservative conference. Charlotte Edwards claims that the Prime Minister squeezed her thigh at a dinner party 20 years ago. Downing Street strongly deny the allegations, but Edwards is adamant, saying, "If the Prime Minister doesn't recollect the incident, then clearly I have a better memory than he does." Some senior Tories have said they believe her, including Health Secretary Matt Hancock on this programme last night.
I know Charlotte well, and I entirely trust what she has to say.
You believe her when she says he grabbed her upper thigh?
Well, I know her, and I know her to be trustworthy.
But here, ministers are tight-lipped.
Do you believe Charlotte Edwards, Nikki?
Look, the Prime Minister and Downing Street have made it very clear that this allegation is not true, and I
And you believe the Prime Minister over Charlotte Edwards? Do you think she's lying?
Very doing, yeah.
Are you saying that she's lying?
Thank you.
I'm saying that I don't have any comment.
Okay. Jacob, do you believe Charlotte Edwards?
You've got to make arrangements properly for interviews. This doorstepping at the party
It's a
conference
party
is not the
conference.
right
We just
way
want to
for
find
you
out what
to
you
be
think
doing
about
it.
what's on the
Go
news.
through the right proprieties and you will have all your questions answered.
Others seem irritated that this is even up for discussion.
Ian, can I just ask you what you think of Charlotte Edwards?
Hang on a second, wait a second.
Ian, do you believe Charlotte Edwards?
It's not my job to believe or disbelieve it. It's a matter the Prime Minister has said is simply beyond any comment on my part, I'm afraid.
So, do you believe the Prime Minister, though? I mean, you're serving under...
Well, I always believe the Prime Minister if he makes a statement about it. And remember,
so Charlotte is lying?
Just hold on a second. In our system, you are innocent until proven guilty, OK? That's all I say. So he has said, not true, I go with that.
They have different memories, so I don't know. I wasn't there.
OK, so do you believe the Prime Minister, though?
And Tory members here seem to be staying loyal to their leader.
That was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was in the 90s, and people, you know, had, who knows, maybe they were drunk. It was at a dinner party.
No, I don't think Boris Johnson has a problem with women. I think it's pretty irresponsible to be making statements about someone with unfounded allegations made against him.
Just get rid of it all. We've got far more important things to worry about than his private life.
But while there is plenty of support from the Tory faithful, could this damage the Prime Minister in the polls?
In the time that Boris Johnson has been leader, he has seen his personal ratings fall back a bit and fall greater among women voters. But in both cases, whether it's men or women, his personal ratings are still, firstly, very high for any politician, and secondly, significantly higher than those of, for instance, Jeremy Corbyn.
Personal or political, this Prime Minister is never far from controversy. But can he move beyond these latest claims, or will he continue to be followed by his past?
Well, joining me now, the Conservative MP Gillian Keegan, Rachel Sylvester, the political columnist at The Times, and Sir Craig Oliver is still with us. Rachel Sylvester, is Boris Johnson fit to be Prime Minister?
I don't think it's up to me to say. The Tory members have chosen him, and the voters at some point will declare whether or not they think he is. But certainly he's shown errors of judgment, he's shown questions about his character, and these latest allegations just raise all those questions again.
Who do you believe?
I don't think Charlotte Edwards is lying. I don't see why she should have any motive to lie at all. I believe her, like Matt Hancock said last night.
So that means when he point-blank denied it today, he's lied again, in your view?
I don't want to accuse him of that, but it...
Well, why not? I mean, he's been shown to have lied before. I mean...
Look, I think these things matter. It's an allegation of sexual harassment. That's, you know, he was in a position of authority at that point over her. And also, I think I spoke to one senior Tory woman here today who said this stuff's priced in for Boris Johnson, but there's a point at which the price gets too high. And I think there's a danger for him that he thinks it's all a distraction, but actually there comes a point when people, especially female voters, start to think, is this the sort of person we want to have leading our country?
Gillian Keegan, do you believe Boris Johnson today when he denies this allegation?
I've no reason not to believe him. I mean, he's in a very prominent position. There's not going to be any proof of this.
You do have a reason not to believe him, to be fair.
I don't know, Charlotte.
Because of his past record.
No, that's definitely not how I see it. I don't look at somebody's past record and think every time they go to dinner they're going to put their hands on someone's thigh. No, that's not how I think. So there's no past, present, future about this allegation, apart from the fact it's 20 years old. It's impossible to know. It's impossible to know. I find it odd that it's come out, although we were just talking, apparently it's, you know, Charlotte's just started work in a new job, and this is her first column. I have no idea. I can't think of why I would bring up something that happened 20 years ago. And things did happen 20 years ago in the corporate world all the time. You know, I worked all over the world. Lots and lots of things happened. Perhaps I should write a book. But the reality is, I can't think why I would now bring that up. So I think I've no reason not to believe him. It's going to be he said, she said. There'll be no evidence at all. You know, and you're innocent till proven guilty.
So Craig Oliver, if you were still, you know, if you were advising Boris Johnson, I mean, is it imaginable for you to be in that situation that the Prime Minister is accused of these sorts of things?
Well, look, the first thing I would be saying is, look, try and shut this down. Do not add any fuel to the fire. And it may sound cynical, but any comms professional looking at this thinks that an on-the-record denial is a real problem, because you put yourself in a situation where journalists report the Prime Minister denies groping a woman, then you're also in a situation where you're almost taunting other people to come forward. So it's not a great idea, even if you want to defend yourself, to add fuel to this particular story. And I think it's a problem. It's kept it going for longer than it perhaps would have done, and it may continue over the coming coming days.
And the other one is potentially bigger, the Jennifer Arcuri.
Well, it depends how you measure it. Obviously, if somebody's going around being a sex pest, that's a very serious issue. The other thing is, obviously, if he is shown to have been in a situation where he's effectively allowed public money to go to somebody it shouldn't, that is obviously a very serious situation. The question is there a paper trail? Is there a way of proving it? So far, nobody's come out with the killer blow.
The other thing that's sort of emerged today is in an interview with one of the regional ITV journalists that Boris Johnson has done here at conference, he was questioned about that very controversial phrase he used with regard to historical sexual offences investigations, where he said, and my apologies for viewers offended by this, that money was being spaffed against the wall. This is what happened when he was challenged on this, and be aware that the language is in this clip if it offends you.
Do you understand that victims of child sexual abuse, survivors of child sexual abuse, will hear you using the word spaffed, which means ejaculated, Prime Minister. Is ejaculated money up the wall investigating paedophiles the right way to talk about this sort of...
These are your definitions, and you've chosen to use this language.
You use the word.
Well, you know...
in a radio studio, on video.
Well, I wasn't referring in that context to investigations taking place in Rotherham, and I think that...
And do you regret those comments, Prime Minister?
I think it's very important that funding is spent on frontline policing.
Rachel Sylvester again, I mean, how do you think this lands?
Well, it's another example of the Prime Minister making light of an incredibly serious issue. He's dismissing almost as a joke and trying to play down the importance of child sexual abuse allegations and using very colourful language. For me, it's the argument he's making rather than the language he uses that's the problem.
But here in the hall and outside at the hall, it's like nothing matters except Brexit.
Yeah.
In all the speeches and all the conversations, it doesn't matter. I mean, they keep announcing things and then people sort of politely applaud. And then if somebody says we're going to leave on October the 31st, they all cheer. That's all anyone cares about.
But then ironically, the slogan here is get Brexit done. But meanwhile, there's a kind of parallel universe down at Westminster where the MPs are meeting to discuss how they can make sure we don't leave without a deal on October the 31st. So it's a sort of weird limbo land conference world here, which is slightly detached from reality.
And I think there's two things that are going on here. There's what's going on in the conference and what's being announced and the media's covering. If you look at social media and what the Conservatives are doing on social media at the moment, it is almost entirely Boris charging around conference, saying I'm going to deliver this, getting people riled up about it and saying it. The message that they're trying to push across, and I think that they have found from focus groups that popular is, if we say that we're the people that we can deliver this, then that will work for them. And I think that's the most interesting thing that's going on.
Hello, good evening from Manchester and the Conservative Party conference. The louder the noise gets, the bigger the spending pledges. Already this week you could clock up some £50 billion worth of promises, a rise in the national living wage, more for buses, rail and roads, and an injection into health. But is anyone hearing it? In the conference, Boris Johnson was fighting to get his Brexit message heard over a chorus of sleazy allegations involving women, groping and taxpayers' money. Will any of that impact his chances of winning an election? Or has politics and his party now changed beyond all recognition? Here's Nick Watt, our political editor. Take us through what today was about first, Nick.
Well, Boris Johnson wants this conference to achieve two big things. Firstly, prove definitively that he will deliver a real Brexit. And secondly, set out what he hopes will be an election-winning programme. So tomorrow will be a big focus on law and order, and Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, will say that she wants to reclaim the Conservatives' reputation as the party of law and order, and she will cite Margaret Thatcher. We will also hear from Robert Buckland, the Lord Chancellor, and he will announce that he's going to end the early release of the most serious, violent and sexual offenders, the early release at the halfway point of their sentences, and he will say that they must serve 2/3 of their sentences before they can be released. But there's real frustration amongst ministers that those sorts of messages are in danger of being overshadowed by questions about Boris Johnson's past, as I found out today.
A conference debut as Prime Minister. Top billing at last, but a leader in charge of events?
Prime Minister, there's quite a cloud over this conference, isn't there?
Questions about Boris Johnson's past amid allegations of inappropriate touching 20 years ago. And he's also facing an inquiry into allegations that, as London Mayor, he failed to declare a conflict of interest over financial benefits to a friend. All denied by the Prime Minister. Message discipline was the cabinet order of the day.
These are serious allegations about the Prime Minister.
Look,
do you have confidence in what he's saying?
You've got to go through the right processes to get interviews.
Loyalists are standing by the Prime Minister for the moment.
I mean, I think he's denied these allegations. I mean, none of us can comment on it. We can just about comment on our own private lives without anybody else's. So you're a public figure. He's a very senior public figure. You know, he's going to have allegations. I think some of these are 20 years old. He's dealt with them. More may come, I don't know. I mean, you know, there's more to go, I guess. There's some inquiry on this cyber security investments. I guess that'll be where the answers. You won't find the answers from me or from ministers because we don't have them.
The past hanging in the air at a conference which is meant to nail down Brexit and usher in a new era for public services and a more active state.